After my best friend and I got into the same university, she ended up with the poor campus heartthrob. As for me, I took on the fragile campus bully who works at a bar. Everyone mocked me for having worse taste than my friend, since the campus bully has a bad temper. I sighed and said, with a sick mom, a gambling dad, a school-going sister, and a broken man, who else is going to take care of him if not me? Enough talking. I just feel sorry for him. Later, my friend and I secretly went to a club in the middle of the night to check out male models. We heard that the poor campus heartthrob was called Vincent Chandler in the top-floor VIP room, and the campus bully was referred to as the Prince of the Beijing Circle. I went to my best friend's apartment to find her. When I opened the door, I saw her sitting on the sofa, her pale feet lifting the campus heartthrob's chin. What's this? 30,000 a month, and you still refuse to be affectionate with the sponsor? No kisses? Are you disgusted with me? Well then, if you won't kiss me, you can lick the milk off my feet. I swallowed, clearly seeing the humiliated campus heartthrob turn his face away, even the tips of his fingers holding my friend's ankle trembling. Seeing the veins on his forehead bulge, I quickly spoke up to interrupt her. Rebecca, what are you doing? Rebecca Barrett saw me, kicked Vincent Chandler on the shoulder, and wiped her foot on his white shirt in disgust before putting on her shoes and walking over to hug me. You're here. I glanced at the campus heartthrob's serious expression and awkwardly nodded. But Rebecca seemed to ignore it, instructing Vincent to pour us tea. As a little gold canary, you have no sense of awareness. I nodded. What my friend says is always right. But wasn't she quite fond of Vincent recently? She even bought a few $1 million cars on a whim. Did they have a fight recently? When it comes to this matter, Rebecca sighed. Don't mention it. 30,000 a month, and I scrimped and saved to buy him so many things, and he still won't give me a kiss. This afternoon, he was out there smiling brightly at a middle-aged wealthy woman. Does he really think I'm a lapdog? I nodded and took a sip of juice. I saw Rebecca wink at me and poke my arm. And yours? Evan Warren's abs from swimming class, that little pert but cough, his stamina must be pretty good. Then she poked the kiss mark on the back of my ear with a resentful look. You little brat, eating so well. I sighed. Don't mention it. His stamina is good, but his temper is too bad. It's just that I talked to the senior for a while this afternoon, came back with red eyes, and he wouldn't talk to me. I tried to coax him for a long time, but it didn't work. Rebecca clicked her tongue, looking at Vincent's departing back with anger. Who told you to take him on? There are so many men, and although Evan looks good, his temper is awful. He almost broke someone's leg before. I had long known about Evan's temper. But that day when I saw him at the bar, he was pushing alcohol and was soaked with liquor. The people laughed loudly while he kept his head down. I couldn't stand it and bought $500,000 worth of alcohol, bringing Evan along. But seeing him so fragile, I was overwhelmed with desire and made him eat piece after piece of watermelon. He looked at me with confused eyes. The white shirt he wore was clinging to him, damp from the alcohol. His face showed shame and embarrassment. I even thought he might hit me. I threatened him, trembling. If you dare to make a move, I'll have the manager cancel the order. He was stunned. Pressing his lips tightly under the light, he looked fragile and charming. No one would have thought that the once aloof and solitary campus bully would secretly work at a bar at night. After hesitating for a moment, he opened his lips and ate the watermelon piece by piece. Later, from the manager, I learned that he had a sick mother, a gambling father, and a school-going sister. Given that my friend recently took on the poor campus heartthrob, why couldn't I take on a fragile and pitiful campus bully? So, on a whim, I took on Evan. I've been supporting him for 3 months now. Everyone knows that Evan is my little gold canary. He's good-looking, has a great figure, but his temperament is too rebellious. When classmates found out, they said I had poor taste because Evan's temper is really bad. I think back to Evan's fragile face under the purple light and feel disdain. What do they understand? He's a rare gem. We were a bit upset. Clearly, we're supporting them, but we still have to flatter and please them. After getting angrier and angrier, Rebecca comforted me. Don't be angry. Tonight, I'll take you to find someone obedient. If he won't listen, then let him go. I nodded in agreement. But neither of us had much money left. And the place Rebecca mentioned was a famous money-burning pit in Kyoto. So I had to call my dad to ask for money. He was puzzled. Didn't I just give you 30,000? How could it be gone so quickly? What did you spend it on? The money came cleanly, but when asked about its use, I stuttered. I vaguely said it was for school expenses, and my dad grumbled but still transferred some money to me. Rebecca also took care of her side. We got in the car and headed straight for the Kyoto Club. After going upstairs, we waved our hands and chose the smallest suite in the corner of the top floor. In the suite, we saw male models of all kinds serving us tea, kneading our shoulders and calling us sister with every word. We were overjoyed. All the frustration from dealing with Evan and Vincent melted away. Rebecca turned to me and asked, "Are you breaking up?" I nodded. "If you break up, I will too." She slapped her thigh. "Spending money to support ancestors, whoever wants to can do it, break up." So she first sent a message to Vincent. "Let's break up." I immediately took a picture of the male model cutting fruit in the suite and sent it to Evan. Then I called him. "Let's break up. I'm bored." On the other end, Evan sneered. "Are you breaking up too?" I simply hung up the phone. On our way back, we were humming a tune when we heard Vincent's cold laughter from behind the door of the 888 VIP suite. "Hey, you got dumped too?" The next moment, we heard the sound of a coffee table being kicked over, accompanied by the sharp sound of breaking glass. "Shut up." I recognized Evan's voice. Exchanging glances with Rebecca, we quietly pushed the door open a bit more and peeked inside to see the scene. Vincent was unrelenting. "I told you a long time ago not to act all high and mighty. Now look, he's tired of you." Evan looked up, giving him a scornful glance. "Ha, what are you? Acting all high and mighty? No one can match you. You still haven't even given him a kiss, just dangling like a tease." Vincent was also angry now. "Enough. Don't talk about me. Even if you put in all the effort, you still got dumped." Vanessa Bishop even sent photos looking for male models. "Don't say anything." Seeing Evan's face growing increasingly uncomfortable, those around them tried to mediate nervously. "Vincent Chandler, maybe you should stop talking." Others continued to whisper reminders. "Don't forget, this gentleman is referred to as the Prince of the Beijing Circle. Exactly the Warren family's status. Stop arguing." Evan wasn't listening to any of this, his face showing irritation. "I'll take her down sooner or later." Nearby, Vincent nodded in agreement. I was trembling with fear and couldn't process the rest of what was said. Evan, the Prince of the Beijing Circle? Last night, I had used a little whip on him, leaving red marks on his back. Rebecca was also shivering, perhaps remembering what she did earlier in the morning, and was even more frightened. We exchanged glances and mouthed to each other. "Run!" As we quietly closed the suite door, I saw Evan unlocking his phone. He zoomed in on the screen with his fingers. He squinted. Rebecca and I nervously tiptoed away. The club manager happened to pass by, his eyes smiling widely as he slightly bent forward. "Miss Jiang, are they taking good care of you?" I was sweating nervously. Hearing footsteps coming from inside the suite, I immediately grabbed Rebecca's hand and we ran off. We nearly had a real-life temple escape. It wasn't until we got back to the apartment and locked the door that we collapsed on the sofa, gasping for air. "What now?" Rebecca was on the verge of tears. I even asked him to record a short video for me last night. He refused, and I mocked him for being pretentious. I'm done for. Honestly, looking at our situation, it seemed we didn't fit the role of virtuous characters at all. We looked like the vicious female antagonists who meet a tragic end in novels. I swallowed. By the way, why were they pretending to be poor? A few of Evan and Vincent's roommates were in the suite earlier, and it was clear they knew their true identities. So why the deception? Rebecca didn't know either, until she saw a post on Songmyeon's social media. The video showed Evan and Vincent in the VIP suite with the caption, "Two brothers bet, and both lost." We were stunned. Is this what Evan's so-called sister is? Even though the Warren and Gu families aren't in the same circle as us, I've heard of them, but I hadn't heard of a sister. And they didn't seem to fit either. Songmyeon and we were from the same middle school, but her family situation wasn't great. She often complained about her roommates isolating her. Rebecca, always with a sense of chivalry, used to take care of her. But later, she spoke ill of us in front of Rebecca and tried to create discord between us. Rebecca was furious and tried to reason with her, but she just cried on the ground. Everyone thought Rebecca was bullying her. From then on, our relationship soured. After the college entrance exams, she didn't get into Kyoto University, but went to the neighboring film academy. She started her career with a fresh and innocent image and gained some fame. Rebecca's eyes turned red. She really liked Vincent. From the first time she saw Vincent at the beginning of the school year, she dragged me to watch him play basketball every day. That's why when she learned Vincent had no money, she chose to support him. She even scrimped and saved to buy things for Vincent. I felt a pang of sadness too. Whether or not Song Myeon's story is true, deception still exists. I comforted her. There are plenty of other fish in the sea. She sniffled. Forget it. What I'm upset about is that car I scrimped and saved to buy him. Can I get it back now? Should have left his name off it. I breathed a sigh of relief. Just then there was a knock on the door. We hid inside, pretending no one was home. The person outside was laughing. Vanessa, open the door. We exchanged glances. Open it or not? I said. Don't open it. Rebecca swallowed. If you don't open it, I won't either. Evan clearly had no patience. He kicked the door open. Rebecca looked at me with tears in her eyes. This is my home. I felt guilty. When Evan came in, he coldly picked me up and carried me away. In the elevator, we encountered Vincent, who had arrived shortly after. He entered Rebecca's apartment with a cold expression. I was worried. Evan seemed to notice and with a carefree laugh said, "You should worry about yourself first, not her." I was shoved into the car, and Evan drove quickly, arriving at the apartment building in no time. As soon as we entered, he pinned me against the door. Breaking up. Then he gritted his teeth. Going to see male models? Saying that, he quickly took off his shirt. Are they better looking than me? I shook my head honestly. They weren't. Seeing that, he laughed angrily. So why break up? I swallowed nervously, seeing the fury in his eyes. It was the first time I had seen him this angry. He usually had a temper in front of me, but I had never seen him with veins bulging on his forehead. If I don't look, how would I know they're not better looking than you? Evan paused. The anger in him seemed to dissipate for some reason. After a moment of hesitation, he murmured, "There might be some truth to that." Then he became angry again. "Don't think I'm going to forgive you. Tonight, should I wear the wolf ears and tail outfit with my eyes covered? No, before I forgive you, I want to choose myself." He said this with red eyes, seemingly a bit angry. As usual, I breathed a sigh of relief. Then he continued to ask me, "Did you see or hear anything in the club earlier?" I blinked. "What?" He curved his lips and took out a leather, hollowed-out vest from the wardrobe, leisurely changing out of his shirt. "Nothing." The next day, after leaving school, we ran into Song Myeon. She sneered. "Aren't you two broken up yet? Don't tell me you think you've climbed to the top and can't let go." I'll tell you, Evan is about to get engaged. And Rebecca, Vincent accompanied me to lunch at the restaurant yesterday noon. We weren't stupid enough to believe her completely. But Rebecca still stepped forward and slapped her. "Are you proud of knowing third-rate people? This slap is for 3 years ago when you falsely accused me of bullying you. I got publicly criticized and isolated by classmates for 3 years, and I should have given it to you then. Do you really think I care about him? If it comes to it, I'll just let him go." Behind us, Vincent arrived with a serious face. He grabbed Rebecca's hand. "What did you say?" Rebecca raised an eyebrow. "What?" Feeling heartbroken. After saying this, Rebecca grabbed my hand and turned to leave. We went to a restaurant for a meal. I saw Rebecca looking furious and reminded her several times to eat less. But unexpectedly, Rebecca received a call from home. Several projects had been halted. She was stunned and then smiled sarcastically. Vincent's call came in at that moment. "When will you be back?" Despite her reluctance, Rebecca returned. I went back to the apartment. Thinking about Rebecca's situation that night, I brought up the idea of breaking up with Evan. He held my waist tightly, pushing through stubbornly. "In your dreams." When I got up in the middle of the night, I saw a large diamond ring in Evan's coat pocket. Evan sat on the bed. his pupils slightly constricted, with a cold expression. I smiled. For me. He hesitated. No. Few days later, a designer from a design company announced that they were setting up an engagement venue for the Warren family, and photos of Vincent and Song Myeon dining together were trending in the news. Rebecca called me out. Since we couldn't afford to offend them, we had to discuss what to do. We talked it over and decided to study abroad. I had originally planned to go abroad anyway, but with Rebecca and Evan here, I had hesitated. Run. Rebecca nodded. Run. Rebecca went back to get her passport. I went back to pack my things and prepare to leave. When I got home, Evan was sitting on the black leather sofa, his eyes half closed. Where have you been? I stammered. I went shopping with Rebecca. He frowned. Stay in less often. I sneered inwardly. Not pretending anymore. He's worried I'll find out about his engagement news? But I still agreed. Okay. I handed him a shopping bag containing a watch I bought to cover up the lie. He glanced at it, set it aside and picked me up horizontally, carrying me upstairs. The next morning, when I woke up, Evan was already dressed, looking satisfied and in a great mood. Seeing me awake, he leaned in and kissed my lips. Want to go somewhere? I glanced at the black decorative alarm clock next to me. It was already afternoon. I felt anxious. Pretending to want more sleep, I curled up under the blanket. Not going. He wasn't angry and brushed a stray lock of hair from my face. All right. You sleep a bit more. I'll send you an address in the evening, and you can come over then. I nodded and acted obediently. Okay. His gaze softened. The sound of the car leaving faded away. I quickly got out of bed, and once I saw Evan had completely left through the floor-to-ceiling window, I quickly changed into a black sun protection suit, along with a black sun protection mask and hat, completely covered up. Since it was summer, my outfit wasn't unusual outside. I grabbed my suitcase and called Rebecca. Learning she had been waiting at the airport for quite a while, I hurriedly took a cab over. When I arrived, she was sweating anxiously. Why did you come so late? Thankfully, Vincent left early this morning. I was also anxious, but fortunately, we boarded the plane smoothly. Before we left, we disposed of our SIM cards. What Evan and Vincent's reactions were after discovering our escape was none of our concern. All we knew was that in the country famous for its handsome men, 2 college students who enjoyed watching good-looking guys were at it. 3 years later, on our graduation day, Rebecca received news that Vincent and Evan were about to get married. She gritted her teeth and insisted on taking me to a bar. To cheer her up, I had no choice but to go with her. While we were sitting on one side, Rebecca suddenly spat out her drink. I followed her gaze. Standing in front of us was a man in a white shirt, with ear studs on his earlobes. He was tall, with broad shoulders and a narrow waist, looking no more than in his 20s. Most importantly, his face was identical to Evan's. We instinctively started to stand up. The manager, who was Chinese, came over and introduced him as the male model Wesley. He even showed me his ID, confirming that he was a Chinese who had settled in Y country, and his name was indeed Wesley. I still didn't believe it, but then I noticed the small mole on the side of his nose. Evan didn't have that mole. We were uneasy, unable to believe that we encountered someone so similar to Evan in a foreign country. The manager introduced him as an experienced model who had been working here for 7 years. Rebecca sighed in relief, noticing my tense body, and patted my shoulder. Don't worry, it's not him. I thought about it too. With Evan's temper, if it were really him, he probably wouldn't be so calm facing me. Also, the media had reported Evan's upcoming engagement today, so he definitely wouldn't be here. There are over 100 countries. Such a coincidence is impossible. We relaxed. The young model sat down, behaving very obediently, complying with whatever Rebecca asked. We were completely at ease. Evan's bad temper would never change in this lifetime. Seeing him tear up from choking on the drink, I silently took out my old iPhone 6s, which was full of scratches and had a cracked screen, the back paint even peeling off. I couldn't bear to replace it. Since Rebecca and I escaped abroad, to avoid being discovered by Evan and the others, we had to ask our parents to stop sending us money, tears in our eyes. So, for the past 3 years we had been studying and working in a restaurant in Y country. Thinking that we would be going back home tomorrow, I looked at the male model who resembled Evan. Looking at the handsome model's face under the lights, to be honest, everyone knows I'm a bit of a lecher. Driven by desire, I kept some of the money for returning home and decided to give the rest to the model. Upon learning that I wanted to tip him, the young model gave a meaningful smile. "Sure, thank you, sister." I looked at his slightly upturned lips and became dazed. By the time I came to my senses, he had already taken out his latest iPhone 15 Pro Max, displaying the payment code. I gritted my teeth and transferred the remaining money to him. He looked at my trembling hand and laughed. "Are you reluctant?" I waved my hand, pretending to be relaxed. "Not at all." Then I leaned closer, eyes sparkling. "Let me tell you, my family is quite wealthy. When you return to the capital, look me up and I'll take care of you." His expression darkened. "All right." After saying that, he glanced at the transfer record of 3,000 yuan on his phone and smiled lightly. "Sister, you should avoid places like this in the future. Making money isn't easy these days." I looked at my slightly calloused hands, recalling the days of washing dishes in the restaurant's kitchen and eating dry bread with Rebecca daily. Struggling to swallow and almost rolling my eyes, I sighed tearfully. "Yeah." He looked at me and continued, "There's another reason." I was slightly puzzled. "What reason?" He said lightly. "If you frequent places like this too much, you'll go deaf." My fell mouth open in surprise. I had never heard of that. My fiancée went once. After that, I told her not to go again because she couldn't hear a thing, but she still went. I didn't expect him to be so emotionally hurt. Suddenly I remembered Evan, who had also told me not to go find male models. I patted his shoulder. "I'm a woman too, I understand." He said nothing more. I looked at the man in front of me. Although he resembled Evan in appearance, his demeanor was quite different. Evan had always had a bad temper in front of me, but since he was good-looking and strong, capable of lasting several hours in bed, I was more indulgent towards him, treating him like a pet. But tenderness was the one thing he couldn't manage. For some reason, I reached out and placed my hand on his firm arm through his thin silk shirt. My fingertips gently rubbed. He watched me with a leisurely smile. Seeing him smile, I said directly, "Don't worry, sister won't do anything to you." Both Rebecca and I had a psychological obsession with cleanliness. Although we knew times had changed, we still preferred clean men. Otherwise, we wouldn't have ended up taking care of the school heartthrob Vincent and the campus bully Evan. It was because they were clean. Not that we had a bias against professions, but just touching hands was enough. We wouldn't have the courage to do anything more. It was just idle talk. Seeing that it was about time, I decided to leave. Thinking about the food waiting for me back home, mapo tofu, braised pork, stewed pork knuckle, roast duck, white cut chicken, spicy chicken, stewed knuckle, I swallowed. 3 years, what kind of life had I lived? So I got up to leave, patted his hand. "Sister is leaving. Hope to meet again." He took out his phone and transferred 300 yuan to me. I looked at him in confusion. Before I could ask, his cold voice said, "Take this to buy some hand cream, sister. My custom shirt is all pilled because of your touch." I looked at his arm. Oh, indeed. Rebecca, who was preparing to go back with me, chuckled beside me. I blushed. I shot a glare at the model. What was this? I had just tipped him so much. If I had known, I wouldn't have tipped him. The more I thought about it, the angrier I became. I turned around, grabbed the still laughing Rebecca's hand, and walked out. After we got outside, Rebecca laughed for a long time. I couldn't hold back anymore. Try laughing more. She wiped the tears from the corners of her eyes. Her whole body was trembling as she stifled her laughter. "Vanessa, oh Vanessa, I never expected you'd end up like this, ha ha ha." I glared at her in embarrassment. Silently glaring at the bicycle. Rebecca stopped laughing. After all, laughing while riding a bike would just make the wind blow into your stomach. It was very cold in Y country at night. As we both reached out to press the green light button, we exhaled in the cold. We saw a gray Lamborghini stop next to us. The window rolled down. To our shock, it was the male model from the bar earlier. "Sister, you're going this way too? What a coincidence." Our faces immediately froze. Do male models earn so much now? That Lamborghini isn't cheap. But then I remembered the manager saying he had a lot of experience, so he must have been working for many years. With such looks, it was no wonder he made money. Thinking about how I had just tipped him 3,000 yuan, I felt a pang of regret. Well, about the tip I gave you earlier. He raised an eyebrow. You're not thinking of taking it back, are you? I gritted my teeth. Of course not. Even though I did want to take it back, I couldn't bring myself to say it, given his expression. With that, I decisively pressed the green light button and rode my bike back to the apartment with Rebecca. To be honest, I felt heartbroken and wanted to cry, but I couldn't because crying while riding a bike would be unsafe. That night, I channeled my sorrow into my appetite. I ate 3 pieces of dry bread in a row. Almost choked, but fortunately, Rebecca noticed in time and gave me a bottle of water. I was still shaken. I couldn't stay abroad any longer. So we quickly packed our things and boarded a plane back home the next morning. As the plane landed, Rebecca and I teared up, looking at the familiar buildings. In the 3 years Rebecca and I had thought about home many times. We even thought about crying at the embassy. Finally, we were back. Rebecca even ordered 50 takeout meals from a delivery platform. The Chinese couple behind us looked shocked. Little girl, are you hosting a welcome party? Rebecca waved her hand. No, I'm eating them myself. Oh. When we reached the airport exit with our luggage, we exchanged a smile. We were back, my sister and I. The phone rang with my dad's cheerful voice. Daughter, have you landed? I was teary-eyed. During the time abroad, to avoid Evan finding out my address, Rebecca and I had barely called home. We would only secretly use someone's phone to call our parents once a year. I'm back, Dad. Are you and Mom coming to pick me up? My dad hesitated. I clearly heard my mom's voice in the background. 4. Lost. And my dad stumbling nervously. Yes, yes. I snorted coldly. Don't try to fool me, old man. I just heard Mom playing mahjong. My dad sounded guilty. I've sent a driver to pick you up. It's a red Alfred convertible. I was shocked. When I left for abroad, our family only had 2 small Mercedes cars. When did they afford such an expensive car? Could it be that my wish for my father to become successful really came true? Could I finally take it easy? Excited, I told Rebecca. It's okay, you go ahead. My brother said he'd send someone to pick me up. We waved at each other and walked towards the 2 cars ahead. As we walked, I was still calculating how to get the car from my dad. I arrogantly opened the car door and got in. Let's go home. Thinking of the 3 tough years abroad, it was the saddest and driest period of my life. I was home now, and this time everything that belonged to me I was going to take back. After the emotional moment, I rolled down the window and saw Rebecca getting into the black Mercedes next door. We began to look forward to the wonderful future back home. Then we both looked at the drivers, originally intending to let them drive. But through the rearview mirror I saw Evan with a cigarette, looking at me with a rebellious gaze. And over there Vincent was turning his head. Baby, long time no see. Rebecca almost fainted from shock, and I screamed in terror. Seeing my terrified expression, Evan smirked. Sister, welcome back to the country. Looking at the mole on his nose, I nearly fainted. Damn it. He was exactly like the male model I saw at the bar yesterday. Do you like it? I had someone arrange it. What Wang Chang? It's clearly Evan himself. I knew something was off. Evan's acting skills were such a waste. He should be in the entertainment industry, unlike Vincent next door, who at least wouldn't keep acting in different ways. I stammered a threat. If you're using fake identification, I'll report you. He laughed coldly. Cece, do you have any evidence? Besides, that's why country's ID. I was at a loss for words. Evan reached out, and I quickly opened the car door and got out. Rebecca, realizing what was happening, hurriedly got out as well. Evan frowned, pulled me back into the car, and shoved me onto the seat. I continued to get out through the other door. As I prepared to drag Rebecca away, Vincent grabbed her and locked her in the car, driving away. Sister, I can't save you now. And I was pinned down by Evan, my hands bound with his tie. Sister, are you scared now? Didn't you say you'd come find me when you got back to the capital? And said you'd take care of me. His eyes were filled with mockery. He then gritted his teeth and said, How many people have you said that to? I was in tears. Back in the small apartment from 3 years ago, everything inside was exactly as it was when I left. He threw me onto the bed, his face dark and menacing. I struggled desperately, but Evan held my head down and kissed me forcefully. He was too rough, with veins bulging on his hand that held the back of my head. The kiss was intense, passionate. His long fingers moved from my skirt upwards. I almost cried, pushing against his shoulder. Evan! Evan responded softly, kissing the tears from the corner of my eye. His gaze fell on my lips and his eyes darkened. It's too early to cry now. When I was with Evan, he was always arrogant and cold with ruthless methods. I thought I was the only one who knew his vulnerable side. I didn't realize it was all a lie. Rebecca and I were just pawns in their game. We were the only ones who understood their circle, where everyone was prideful. Being rejected by us made them more angry and embarrassed. But why? Why must we be entangled with them? Rebecca and I were no naive heroines. We avoided them because we knew our soft spots were our families. For people like Evan and Vincent, if they set their minds to it, their families' businesses might not be able to support them. And since I had always wanted to study abroad, I fled with Rebecca in a hurry. I reached out, trying to block his exploring fingers. Evan, you've been engaged to someone else for 3 years and are about to get married. Have some self-respect. Even if I bullied you back then, it was you who deceived me first, wasn't it? He was silent for a while, then suddenly smiled. Sister, don't you know? You were the one engaged to me back then. As for the wedding, if I hadn't leaked the news, would you have come back? You ran away on the day of the engagement. What should I do? I had to complete the engagement banquet alone. Do you know what they mocked me for privately? I was stunned, but I still wanted to hear more. What did they mock you for? He slowly unzipped the side of my dress, leaning in close to my ear. His gaze was heavy as he whispered, Of course, they mocked me for having a runaway wife. For a moment, I didn't know whether what he said was true or not, but I knew Evan wouldn't bother to lie to me with this. Given his status, if he was engaged to someone else back then, even if he managed to hide it from me now, he couldn't keep it from me forever. Why did you pretend to be a bartender in the bar back then? After saying that, I looked at Evan. He chuckled lightly. What do you think? Seeing my evasive eyes, he bit my earlobe. When I first saw you on the basketball court, I liked you. But you were too scared of me. I glared at him. No wonder he had such a bad reputation at school. He lifted me up, his lowered brows tinged with red. Vanessa, I missed you so much. That night, I sent a message to a former friend from our circle who was also a classmate of Rebecca and me, asking about the details of the marriage alliance between the Warren family and my family. I learned that Evan had indeed proposed the marriage alliance. When my parents saw the 20% stake in the Warren family and looked at Evan, they were eager to send me away and immediately agreed to the alliance. He was supposed to propose to me that day, but by the time he came to pick me up, I had already left for abroad. Vincent was also planning to propose that day. That day, when the Warren family member and Mr. Gu went to the airport to chase after you, they had a car accident and were bedridden for over a month. Song Myeon had signed with an entertainment company, but was exposed for her relationship with Vincent at a rap party, leading to a lot of negative news and her being shelved. After a long silence, I told Rebecca about this. On the way back, I passed by the small study. The walls were covered with photos of me in Y country. There was also a wall calendar. Below it, in elegant calligraphy, were notes expressing 3 years of longing. I recalled that part-time dishwashing job where I only worked half an hour each day, and the numerous times a philanthropist scholarship appeared when Rebecca and I were struggling with tuition fees, and the black figure that pressed me down during a gunfight abroad. I smiled slightly. Rebecca and I were no delicate flowers. Although Vincent and Evan had deceived us, and even if we confronted them if they didn't let go, there was nothing we could do. But leaving wasn't the only option. It was just that Rebecca and I were in a situation where studying abroad fit well with our escape plans. Back in the room, I looked at Evan, who was packing my luggage, and hugged his waist. His eyes brightened. Want me? Yes. The next day, Evan still took me home. Before getting out of the car, he turned to look at me, his long fingers resting on the steering wheel. Cece, don't leave. I won't force you. Okay. He smiled and, seeing my relaxed expression, leaned in to kiss my lips. His breath brushed my nose. Remember to message me. Don't ignore me. I nodded. When I got home, instead of being greeted by my parents' loving embrace, I found an empty house. It turned out my parents were traveling in Europe. Just as I was about to breathe a sigh of relief, I received a call from my dad's assistant. Mr. Bishop, what time will you be arriving at the office tomorrow morning? I need to arrange the meeting schedule. I.O.? After giving an approximate time, I called my dad. He laughed. Well, your mom and I haven't traveled together in 3 years. It's time for a break. Now that you're back from studying abroad, it's time for you to start taking over things. Daughter, Mom and Dad will always love you. Then I heard my mom's voice on the line. Darling, come here, there's a crab here. Coming. Oh. After hanging up, I clenched my teeth. The advantage of having no one at home was that I could talk to Evan anytime. We tacitly avoided mentioning the engagement. He just called me sister every day. I thought I was swamped with taking over the company and didn't reply to him. Unexpectedly, during a meeting, my phone's notification sound went off. When I checked, it was a photo of Evan wearing only an apron. Though the front was obscured, his broad shoulders, narrow waist, and rear were visible. I flushed red and quickly turned off the phone screen. Luckily, I hadn't projected my phone onto the projector. Why was he suddenly so provocative? Could it be because I agreed to try continuing our relationship? Compared to his bad temper 3 years ago, it seemed he was now trying to win me back in some way. When I subtly suggested that Evan seemed to be seducing me, Rebecca was astonished. You just realized now? He asked me what you liked, and I told him you like provocative stuff. Traitor. She quickly waved her hand. No, he transferred me 10 million, and I transferred it all to you. I suddenly remembered that Rebecca had indeed transferred a sum of money to me a few days ago. I couldn't help but laugh. No wonder Evan had been so unusual recently. I stood up and patted Rebecca's shoulder. Let's go shopping. My treat. Rebecca happily stood up. I've been waiting for you to say that. Now that you're the new Mr. Bishop, don't forget the commoners. I get lost. Oh. When I got home, I finally had time to reply to Evan's messages. Opening the chat, there was a series of recent messages. Evan, do you like it? Why aren't you speaking? Sis, are you shy? Want to come to my place now? I'm all set. Sis, ignoring me. Vanessa, you're being too much. Being so indifferent to me for days. Sis, I have a fever. Oh. Then there were several photos from different angles. Some were of him cooking, with a thin layer of sweat on his well-defined arms. Others showed him carrying dishes over. I even started to doubt what our current relationship was. Was it really just a simple interaction? It didn't seem like a normal relationship at all. I suddenly remembered the time 3 years ago when Evan was my kept man. He had also sent me a photo. It was the day I was chatting with the senior. In the photo, he looked dazed, his clothes half wet, lying on the sofa, his jawline smooth. Sis, will you come pick me up? I could only greet the senior and drive to pick him up. But as soon as we got home, he looked at me with red eyes, full of grievances. When I asked him what was wrong, he just looked at me and said, Aren't you out on a date with another man? Did I do something wrong? I was indeed swayed by this and comforted him for a long time. Afterward, my patience ran out and I ended up storming out. The next second, the phone rang. Busy. I nodded. I've been busy with taking over the company recently. There's indeed a lot to learn. He chuckled lightly. Let me teach you, how about that? My eyes brightened. Evan was indeed top-notch in this field. Not to mention the Warren family's early cultivation. Just looking at the development of the Warren family under his management these years was enough to know his prowess. Sometimes his words could solve problems that many CEOs would rack their brains over. Okay. He sneered with mockery. The next morning, when I arrived at the company, Evan was already there. By the end of the day, I had indeed learned a lot. Afterward, Evan placed me on the desk. Sis, you haven't paid for today's tutoring yet. Oh. When we came out, Evan said he was going to buy something. I waited alone downstairs. A person dressed in a teddy bear costume handed me a rose. I was a bit surprised. After thanking him, he told me to walk down the commercial building. Across the street was a park by the lake. There were staircases going up and down. As I walked, more people in teddy bear costumes handed me roses. I seemed to guess what was going on. Sure enough, when I reached the open space in the park, the last person in a teddy bear costume opened a ring box. Inside was a diamond ring. He took off his headgear, his dark, tousled hair damp with a light sweat. "Vanessa, this is the ring I prepared for you 3 years ago." Seeing him in this state made me inexplicably emotional. No wonder it's so old-fashioned. But the ring is quite beautiful. His eyes lit up. I didn't know when, but the lights of the commercial building behind us had turned on. I turned around and saw our names displayed on it. "Oh, so, you really want to support me for the rest of your life?" He smiled. I remembered the first time I met Evan when, driven by desire, I agreed to support him. He had lowered his brows and asked, "But how long are you willing to support me? I still have such a family." My heart softened and I smiled as I promised him, "A lifetime is fine too." Not long after, Vincent also proposed to Rebecca. At Rebecca's and my request, our weddings were held on the same day. After we met, we even made a video together with the theme of getting married on the same day as best friends. The video unexpectedly received a lot of views. The elegant woman who appeared at the wedding was Vincent's mother. After a day of hustle and bustle, the wedding finally ended. Evan and I stared at each other. Finally, I couldn't help but blink. "What's the next step?" He chuckled lightly, silently removing his high-quality wristwatch, and then adjusted the tie around his neck. He lifted me up and tossed me onto the soft big bed. "Well, the next step should be something not suitable for children." There was no need to be so straightforward. As he pressed me down on the bed, his masculine allure was irresistible. His narrow eyes filled with restrained desire. His high nose bridge, thin lips curling into a smile, gradually moved closer to me. I suddenly thought of something and pushed him away. Perhaps because he wasn't expecting it, he was indeed pushed away, his face turning dark. Gritting his teeth, he said, "Cece, what's wrong now?" I put on my fur-trimmed, exquisite satin slippers and went to fetch a medium-sized box. I was about to video call Rebecca. Evan stopped me, a vein throbbing on his forehead. "You don't need to video call just because you're close with her, do you?" I slapped his hand away. Looking at him with confusion, I asked, "What are you talking about? What are you thinking about every day?" After saying that, my phone rang with Rebecca's video call. I quickly answered it. In the small corner of the screen, Vincent, sitting on the bed wrapped in a blanket, looked displeased. Yet Rebecca and I were both very excited. "Quick, let's start." Evan frowned slightly. Just as he was about to say something, I took out large red envelopes from the box and began to count them carefully. Rebecca was also unwrapping envelopes. After opening the envelopes, we unwrapped the gifts. The envelopes contained checks from elders. As for the gifts, most were from guests and friends. The more I unwrapped, the more excited I became. When we finally finished chatting excitedly, we ended the video call. As soon as the phone was set down, Evan angrily threw me onto the bed. I blinked, just about to struggle, when he patted my bottom. Gritting his teeth, he said, "Vanessa, you damn well stay down." A few days later, I was sitting with my toes on Evan's legs. He had red-rimmed eyes. "Sis, stop playing," I sneered. "Evan, you damn well endure it." Later, Rebecca texted me in the middle of the night, "Are you running away? I can't stand him anymore. He's so perverted." I used to think he was aloof, like some high and mighty person. I never expected him to be such a beast. I picked up my phone, about to reply, when the man beside me, who had been sleeping, reached out with his bony fingers and took my phone away. After glancing at the screen, he sneered. Then he called Vincent. "Take care of your wife. Stop trying to take mine away." Though it's no wonder. Mr. Goosecharm is quite ordinary. I listened in shock. Then Vincent's voice came from the other end. "Don't worry about it, Mr. Cheen." Then I heard him say to Rebecca, "Honey, you're already 3 months pregnant. Are you still trying to run away? You like playing so much? Then wheel. You wanted me to lick the milk off the back of your feet, right?" Followed by Rebecca's angry voice. "Pervert." The call ended. I blinked. Rebecca was pregnant? Am I going to be a godmother? No, did I just hear that correctly? Why did it go silent at the critical moment? As I was in a daze, Evan picked me up, squeezing my arm, forcing me to straighten my back. My body leaned slightly forward. He chuckled softly. Oh. After a long time, we stood in front of the floor-to-ceiling window. He bit my earlobe. Cece, you're so good. I blushed, my whole body trembling. Until I was so exhausted I had no strength left in my fingers. Before I fell into a deep sleep, I saw Evan slipping a 15-carat diamond necklace into my palm. Then he placed a kiss in my palm. Vanessa, I love you. Extra. A few years later, Rebecca was holding a 5-year-old boy by the hand, while I was carrying a little girl dressed in a puffy skirt. During a rare holiday, we decided to take the kids out to play. We left the 2 little childhood sweethearts in a small children's playground and sat on the side, ordering 2 fruit teas. We chatted about Evan and Vincent. Early this morning, Vincent's news about falling for a female star at the company came out. TSK. I've always said that men are unreliable. Oh. As we talked more animatedly, with widened eyes and mysterious expressions, the wealthy women next to us were almost driven mad, wishing they could eavesdrop directly. We continued gossiping. After the gossip, the entire household seemed to agree that we were the only good people. It was refreshing. Oh. That night, Evan carefully asked me, "Darling, Vincent's kid got into another fight with his wife. If I say that they're on the verge of divorce?" I yawned. "If she wants to leave, let her." Evan shut his mouth, quietly moved to the side, and gritted his teeth while making a call. "If you really get divorced, I'll ruin you." Vincent on the other end was silent for a long time. "Are you crazy? How does my divorce concern you? Besides, it's her who wants a divorce, not me. I'm even kneeling on a washboard now. The paparazzi who spread rumors about me cheating have already been beaten up by me. It was just something in my eye, and they said I was infatuated with someone. If you're not going to help, why say such things? What does it have to do with you?" Evan glanced at me and sneered. "Damn right, it's none of my business." "It's very much my business." Oh. When we returned, Evan cautiously held me in his arms. "Darling, am I still not as important as that woman in your heart?" Clicked my tongue. "Who told me I met her first, my dear?" Evan gritted his teeth. Compared to the rebellious youth he once was, he now had a touch of steadiness, though his eyes were still cold. But at home, his gaze toward me and our daughter was always gentle. I was an only child, destined to inherit the family business, so I was always very busy. After our daughter was born, Evan took on most of the childcare responsibilities. I worked during the day while he brought our nanny, Shelby, to the company, setting up a nursery next to the office. Whenever he had time, he would take care of the baby. My mother had repeatedly urged me to pay more attention to the child, but I was simply too busy. What I learned in country Y was being applied domestically. The company had expanded more than tenfold compared to when my father managed it. My father often sighed. Studying abroad really makes a difference. I didn't think my advantage was much. I only changed the product packaging, plus my father's products were always of high quality and had accumulated a good reputation. With the updated packaging and more designs suited for women, we achieved these results. Evan had never brought the child to the company to disturb me. I rarely had time to be with the child, and today happened to be a holiday from the early education class, so I took our daughter out. Although Rebecca seemed casual, she had become a director at her own company. Her designs were always bold. Her performance was also quite impressive. Seeing Evan's pitiful appearance now, I felt an inexplicable tenderness. I reached out and wrapped my arm around his neck, whispering a few words in his ear. His eyes lit up. The night was still long. Oh, so was the rest of our lives.